Hello, welcome back. Filming these back to back, of course, it makes it a lot easier. So, last time with my tips, I was talking about thinking and coming up with sequences or maybe a little bit of character ideas based off of inspiration from other media sources like music, film, and other stuff. Just you can pull from anything, honestly, that's been published or brought out there. So, you have these inspirations now, you have these little scenes in your head, but you don't really know what to do with them. Well, that's where this tip comes in. This tip is define. You have these sort of loose, blurry images of a full picture, right? You have, a scene of somebody fighting. You have a scene of maybe a couple of characters talking, and it's a real serious, deep scene. Maybe, to use another example, pulling from Johnny Cash's Hurt, you could have a scene about a character talking about how they're at the end of their road, right? And then what you do is you begin to stitch together these scenes. You sort of Frankenstein these scenes together, right? And the key to this, and what most people don't realize, is that the explanations for your story, for your lore, for why these scenes are coming together, come together. They happen when you stitch the scenes together. Explanations arise when there is a conflict in your narrative. So if there is a problem between this scene making sense and this scene making sense, instead of trying to fight and argue on like why you should like maybe change the scene or whatever, come up with an explanation for it. That's where your personal creativity comes in. You have the inspiration from other people, but your own personal ideas will come to fruition when you explain the connection between your inspirations, right? And this is wonderful for making characters as well. Because you are trying to connect one scene to another scene, maybe there's only one type of character that works in both scenes. And so you make that character. That becomes one of your characters for your story, right? And you do that over and over again. A couple of scenes combining together to make a singular character. And you could do that for as many characters as you wish. Hell, I have 16 in my book, and they're all sort of working together. But my point is that two scenes equals, you know, a singular character. Combine them. Once you have an established character, you can connect them to more scenes. And maybe if you start to think about that character passively, when you listen to other media, you might think of that character again and be like, oh, this is a scene that could work for them. This is something that could work. And you'll come up with more sequences and more ideas. You'll think more, and then you can define more. And it's sort of this cycle of thinking and defining that comes together. That's what makes a story. It breeds imagination. It's incredible how quickly you can come up with an idea as long as you have a couple of rough, you know, scenes and sequences that you try to tie together. The most important thing when you have these sequences and you start to build these characters, you have to create conflict. Now, this sort of leads into our next tip, but it's a bit distanced from it. A story is not compelling unless it has conflict. And you cannot begin to start the story unless you know what the conflict is, right? And so you have to establish what that conflict is. Is it personal? You have all those points of views of like man versus nature, man versus God, man versus society. Like these sort of conflicts between like a main character and another main character, or an antagonistic like business or an antagonistic society, like a dystopian future where they're being oppressed. There's so many different things that you can do with it. Whatever fits your scenes the cleanest is what you want to go with for your conflict, right? So in a story about gods and how they interact with each other, having a actual like being, right, an actual enemy is good for me, right? Because I get to actually have like, this is the bad guy. You don't have to worry about who it is. It's this person, and now you can focus on how to beat them or how they are. That is the conflict. Now the story is about how to overcome it, right? And your story can have a pre-established conflict, or it can have one that is established during the story, and you have to have your characters overcome them. That's the biggest thing. You can subvert expectations by having your characters fail at the end of the story. You can maybe have a compromise. You can mess around with the conflict all you want, but the point is that there has to be one. So let me go over what I said today. We have a couple of scenes. We have a couple of ideas from inspired maybe by other ideas or maybe by our own personal imagination. We come up with these ideas. We have random puzzle pieces of knowledge that we could put together. And then once we start to stitch them together, we create an explanation for why these scenes exist in the same universe, how they work, what they have to do with each other. And that key to explaining the scenes is a character. A character fitting in between scenes, making sense of what is happening, making sense of why these things are happening in the same universe, right? Finally, once you've created a few characters, once you've created a couple of scenes, right? Then you create a conflict. That is your main drive of the story, the whole reason why you're telling it. Either a win or a loss by the good guys or bad guys, it doesn't matter, but there is a conflict, and that's what breeds. I keep using that phrase. And that's what brings attention and what brings intrigue to your story is how good your conflict is, right? So that's all I got for you today. Next, I'll be talking about some big parts of actual like story crafting, and it'll probably remind you of like English classes. But I'm going to be talking about the beginning, climax and ending of your stories and how to really establish those. So be looking forward to that. For your little homework today, if you want to go down to the comments, tell me either you can choose one of the two. You can either tell me a conflict, right, that you've established a decent conflict, and don't just say like man v man. That's obviously like a very basic conflict. I'm saying like tell me a specific conflict, like this character against this character, and tell me like their inspirations or whatever. You do that, or go down and tell me maybe a couple of scenes, maybe from your previous comments on the previous tip. Maybe combine a couple of scenes that you had ideas for, and tell me a correlation between this scene and this scene. All right. So if you can do that, it's showing that you're already improving if you found yourself unable to come up with a story before this. If you can do these simple things in the comments, writing a book is not that much harder. It's just doing that a lot. It's really not a huge thing. You just have to get it established and then do it. So thank you for sticking around. This has been the second tip, and feel free to join me for the next one.